Hey there, everybody. I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Wendy Yee.
And I'm Chris Yee.
And today we're going to be taking a look at Ezra and Nehemiah, the newest game in the Ancients collection from Garfield Games and designers Shem Phillips and S.J. McDonald. This is a game that is following up from Raiders of Scythia in the line, although they're very different thematically. You had Hadrian's Wall before that. So this is a game that is historically based. I would say it's one of the heavier games in their catalog. So I think why not just show you an overview. Please don't look at this as a how to play, an overview of how the game works, and then we'll come right back here. Okay, here we see a 4-player game of Ezra and Nehemiah set up. In this game, players are going to be playing through 3 rounds. Each round will consist of 6 work days and 1 rest day, known as the Sabbath day. On a player's turn, they're going to be placing a character card from their hand onto their player board, and they're going to be taking actions associated with the character that they chose. That's going to be based upon these banners. So you have 3 main actions based upon the 3 colors, red, gray, and blue, and all of them are going to have a particular area on the board. Let's start with the red, and that's going to be in this area right here towards the left of the board. Here you're going to be making offerings to either the temple or the altar, and you're going to be doing that by placing resources from your supply into one of these 2 areas. You're also going to be able to add workers that are going to become known as Levites into this area here. The blue action is essentially teaching the Torah, and that's going to be a matter of placing your workers, which in this area are going to be known as scribes, onto these tiles starting from the bottom up, and it's also going to entail moving your tent around this kind of circular rondelle type of a area right here. The gray action is associated with the walls and the gates that are around the outer edge of the board, and it's going to primarily consist of removing rubble from the cards and then potentially building their walls onto these spots, which I'll show you in a little bit. But that's the essential part of the game. 1 character card that's going to correspond to one of the 3 main actions. All right, let's take a closer look at the player board just so you can get an idea mechanically how you take your turns. Every player is going to start with a few things during setup: 5 silver, 3 food, their own deck of character cards, their own deck of wall cards that are associated with their color. They have their blessings set at 0 here. There are 3 blessings. And you got these development tiles which are outside of the board, and they're all slightly different from each other for each player. For example, this tells you what starting resources you have. I ended up starting with gold, and stone. And it tells me that I have room for 6 resources to store. All right. Also, you would draw the top 4 cards of your deck to begin your starting hand. And so, as I said, you're going to be playing one of these character cards to take a main action and possibly some auxiliary actions. And the things you're going to be looking for are really threefold. Number 1, you're going to be looking at the banners along the left side of the cards. They're going to tell you what type of action points, I kind of think of the banners as action points, like a currency, that you have available and for which type of main action. All right. The other thing that you will likely be looking at is down here along the bottom. This gives you a potential trade opportunity on your turn, only on the turn that you played the card, however. So for example, if I played the Mason, I would be able to spend 1 stone for 2 silver as many times as I want to or can. There are others that look like this, which are going to be making trades with the gatekeepers of the particular gates in the game. So in this case, if I wanted to trade with the gatekeeper at the Valley Gate, I would have to pay them a silver, and then that would allow me to either get a stone or pay 2 additional silver to get 2 of them. Now, at the beginning of the game, no one is going to be a gatekeeper because none of the gates have been built. In that case, you're putting the silver that you spent onto that card so that whoever does build the gate is going to potentially have some built up silver there. All right, so let's say, for example, I wanted to go ahead and play with this card, the teacher. So this is telling me that when I play this, I'm going to have 3 banners in blue. And so let's just play this here in the center spot to reinforce. You can play them in any order you want. And then that's going to allow me to be able to take kind of a strength 3 blue action, which is going to be teaching the Torah and moving the tent around. There are some other things that you can do on your board that I want to show you that can potentially augment that. So, for example, for this teacher, it gives me 3 banners. I can always place one of my workers, if I have them in my supply, to this area, which is going to augment those particular banners. So if I placed it in this spot, it is giving me an extra 2 blue banners and a silver. So I could take the silver from the supply, and now essentially I have 5 blue banners to work with. I also could potentially put a worker over here if I needed some resources. Here I can get 2 coins and a bread, food. Here I can get any resource except for gold and a food, etc. You can put those there, but they're going to stay there until the end of the round, and so you won't have them to go and place out on the board. So playing a character card, potentially augmenting them, you'll end up playing 6 total cards. At the beginning, it doesn't make sense to cover up any of the cards before all 3 are played, so you'll eventually play 6 because you draw 1 at the end of each of your turns. And so I would have this at the end of a round. The other thing that you're thinking of when you play these is the top of the card, because at the end of the round, when you are doing the Sabbath turn, the rest turn, you are going to be looking at the top, and you're going to be tucking, depending on the round, 1 or 2 of these cards above your little player aid, and they're going to give you a scoring that happens during every Sabbath period. So the things that look like this are the victory point symbol, and they're in gray, so it means you would score them right away. If it's endgame scoring, it'd be the same symbol in gold. But let's say that I had built a number of walls this round, or I was going to focus on that in the game. This is giving you a point for every wall built. And remember, you're not only getting that scoring this round, but you're going to be getting it on the following ones too. So you'd place it right up there. You are losing its trade ability now because it's going to stay here for the rest of the game, but you are gaining a permanent banner, and you're getting that scoring for each of the scoring rounds. Okay, so that kind of shows the player board. You'll also be moving your blessings up and getting boons along the top for that too. One last thing before we go away from the player board is that one of the auxiliary actions we already talked about, making a trade with the character card you played that turn. The other thing that you can do is you can spend the required resources to turn over one of your development tiles. The costs to do so are listed in the upper left-hand corner. There's also going to be a green banner that tells you a boon you get immediately when you upgrade it, and it's going to make a better version of that tile. So let's say, for example, I spent 8 silver to upgrade this tile. I would then be able to get 1 movement on the tent track, because that's what's in green there, and I would flip it over. Now, this is worth 2 points at the end of the game in the upper left there, and I have no limit to the number of resources I can carry. It also gives me ability, and a particular ability during every Sabbath. So these all get better as you flip them. All right, so this one gives you 2 food and a silver. This one gives you 2 food, a silver, and always 2 food, no matter who you send there. What do I mean by send there? At the end of a round, any unused workers are either going to go to this farmer spot or this laborer spot. All right, that's why sometimes you want to keep workers left over, because it'll give you some particular benefit. Here, for example, these 2 workers, one of them could get 2 resources, the other can get a resource and 2 coins, or they can both go to the same one and get 4 resources. As I mentioned before, that would give you some boon, but what this means is that no matter whether you have a farmer there or not, for the rest of the game, every Sabbath you get 2 food. So that's kind of how those upgrades work. These give you better versions of those particular things. Let's go back to the main board so I can just give you an idea on how those main actions kind of look. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 actions. Let's start with the red bannered actions here, which you can see, for example, on this card would give you 3 red banners. You may have additional banners on your player board. You may have them through cards, etc. But that's going to be relating to the temple here and the altar here. On your turn, if you are taking a red temple action or altar action, you can place one of your workers into this area paying the cost along the left side, getting the boon along the right. And you are going to be putting one up here. So this is going to tell you the number of resources you can either place in the temple or in the altar. In this case, if it was the purple player, they can place 2. What's going to happen is if you place here, you look along here for the cost. So if you had 3 banners, you can place one anywhere along this row that is open, and you're going to get a particular number of points right away. In this case, if you were to put stone or wood, you'd get 1 point. If you were putting gold there, you'd get 2 points. Okay, and you're also going to get whatever the bonus is there. Again, those are gray. You'd get those points right away. You don't have to start at the bottom and work up. You can spend whatever you've got in banners to place wherever there is an open spot. If you see these 3 little distinct areas, the last person to fill one of those up is going to get a particular boon that is underneath those. So these can help the number of things you can put out. They could also count as a red banner if you weren't spending them on anything else. Here in the altar, you're going to be spending a number of banners, either 3 or 1, to place wood or cinder here, and that's going to move you up along this track, okay? And so one of the things that's going to happen is that as you move along, you're going to get some boons along the bottom, but it's also, at the end of the round, going to tell you where you fall on this altar card. So you have these 2 kind of little pieces that are set out here, and they're going to tell you on the first round they were set at 2 and 6. If you are below this piece, you have to spend a food. If you're in the middle, like the purple player is here, they get 1. If they're beyond that, they would get 2 food. So that's going to increase every round. You can see in the second round it'll go to 5 and 10. So you would move these. The goal marks, so to speak, are constantly shifting, and so you have to kind of be always paying attention to that to not get hit too hard there. All right, so the red action is going to be placing resources in one of these 2 areas, potentially placing out a Levite to boost up these actions and get boons. Next thing we're going to talk about is the blue action, which is teaching the Torah, and that's going to be focused on this area of the board right here. Depending upon the number of banners that you have, you're going to be taking the actions for those costs, okay? So, for example, let's say you had 6 banners and you wanted to place a worker out there that's going to be a scribe. Well, you have to start from the bottom. So the first thing that you'd have to do if there was nobody there is you'd have to spend 3 of your 5 banners and 2 silver to place one of your workers out on this bottom row here. So in this case, let's say they chose Nehemiah. What that's going to do is it's going to give them this hero card, which in this case is Nehemiah. There are 3 out there, and it's going to give them a permanent banner in the associated color and some boons along the bottom. All right. Once players are out here, once scribes are out here, you can build on top of them. So you can go from Nehemiah to this one and this one. Future players can, or so could the red player. If the red player were to build one of those 2, they would just have to pay the normal cost. If any other player wanted to build on top of another player, they have to pay them a silver in addition to each of the costs there. So I said earlier that we had 6 blue banners. We spent 3 of them here. The other 3 we can spend right here. So they wouldn't be able to use all of them. It would get wasted. They can use 2 of the 3 to get 1. Oops, this one was already moved for some reason. To get 1 movement. So let's say purple did that. They would just move clockwise around this little circular board, and they would get whatever they crossed over. In this case, they would get one of those red blessings that I showed you before on their player board. So that is teaching the Torah. The last action, the main action, is the gray action, and that's going to be related to clearing the rubble that has been placed randomly around the board at the beginning of the game and building walls. All right? What does it take to clear rubble? It tells you right here. It takes 1 gray banner to clear cinder, 2 gray banners to clear stone or wood, 3 gray banners to get gold, to clear gold. And then in addition to that, let's say that, for example, that someone had cleared this one. They spent 2 of their gray flags and they still had 4 left over. What this is saying, and it could even be the same turn by the same player, if you have 4 additional banners and 3 of these 3 wood resources, then you could build this wall. It would immediately give you a boon, and then you take one of the wall cards that you had from your deck. Let me just reach over and grab one of the purple ones, and you would place it on top of it. This is going to give you, at the end of the game, 3 points and some immediate boon, in this case, moving up this track. It also is going to tell you who owns it, and there is some scoring that can go on between walls and gates that I'm not going to really get too lost in the woods from here. When you build a gate instead, you're going to take the corresponding card from the side, in this case the valley gate, and you're going to put your worker on top of it. You can't build a gate if you don't have a worker. All right? So that is the gray actions in a nutshell. You're going to play through 6 turns. You're going to be placing out those 6 cards. At the end of the round, you're going to choose, depending upon the round, how many cards you tuck. In the first round, you place 1. Second round, you place 2 above this board. And the third round, you place 1. And when above this board, I mean here. So let's say, for example, I had been building walls or knew I wanted to build walls in the game. During each Sabbath, for every wall that I have built, I get a point. And again, this is not just in the year it was built, or excuse me, in the round it was built, but in future rounds too. I would already have 1 if this was the purple player because I have 1 wall built. All right? And that is all written here. You're going to be placing out those farmers and laborers I talked about. You have to pay food for your workers, potentially losing points, and moving along here, getting any potential busts or boons, so to speak. All right, well, that's the gist of the game. Let's head back and let you know what we think. Okay, well, hopefully that gave you an idea of what's happening in the game. It's not the kind of game that you can give a thorough overview in a reasonable amount of time. But I also hope that it showed you that while there's a lot going on, you really have 3 main actions that you're focusing on. And I think that helps a bit with the teaching and learning area of the game. Now, beyond that, there are still some fine details you definitely have to think about. But we tend to start things off with the components, the component quality. Would one of you like to kind of start with that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that overall I'm very happy with it. I like the vases. I think the vases are the cute thing behind it. You have the meeples that we see in these games all the time, the cards, all those kind of things. But yeah, for me, it's the meeples, like the little vases that I think are pretty adorable.
It's kind of like there's almost no standout production-wise, but that's because, for me, I've come to expect a certain quality from Garfield Games. With that, you'll notice that, like, for example, our library's copy has a decent amount of lift, because I think that my biggest complaint would be to get this game to fit in there without the lift, you'd have to store it in specific ways, like not put all player cards of a single color in with pieces and everything. It'll just create inefficient use of space, but that's how we store games, and I think a lot of people do. I think you're going to see lid lift.
And I think at this point, we have larger boxes for other of these games. You know what I mean? Like if this was literally the only box size, I'd be like, I understand. I don't understand because we have the larger box sizes.
I understand a little bit. Because it's the same box size essentially as Hadrian's Wall and Raiders of Scythia, which have kept the not small, but medium-sized boxes, I would call them. Is it a tight fit? It absolutely is a tight fit. I can get it with no box lift, and actually, Chris, I actually do what you said that you don't think you can do. I put the cards in there with the player pieces. Or do I? No, I have them in 2 bags. You're right. I have them in 2 bags. I have the wooden bits in one, the cards in the other. So you're right there. And it is tight, and you are Tetrising it. Could it have gone in a bigger box? 100%. At least a deeper box, but I think they're trying to be somewhat standard on these. But I would not be surprised if this does well, that it's going to have expansion. And if that's the case, we'll get it in one of those bigger boxes, almost guaranteed.
That will happen. One thing that I really like about this game is I love the use of the banners, like the action selection in this game, how you're playing those 6 cards, but you're playing them on top of each other. And so you're trying to balance what banners am I trying to build in this like mini round engine. You know what I mean? Like it ends at the end of the round kind of thing. But what am I trying to build there? And then at the end of it, I have to make sure that the card that I want to tuck for the points and for the future permanent flag, I want to make sure that I didn't play that in my first 3 cards, which I do all the time. I'm like, ooh, I want these, I want these flags and these abilities. And I'm like, wait, that's the card I wanted to tuck and now it's underneath.
Yeah, I think that the card system is one of their best because there are kind of the 3 main things you're focusing on. So if you like multi-use card games, I don't know that I would call this necessarily, well, it is multi-use. It's just a different way of doing it. So clearly you're looking at the banners because that's going to be the action you're focusing on. And what's nice is, as you said, the banners are going to stay there until they get covered by another card. So you can also be thinking not only of the turn that you're in, but what you may want to do next turn, because some of the characters have 3 of the banners, others will be more diversified, and so you're like, okay, I'll take a slightly weaker red action this turn because it has a couple of blue banners on it also, and I have access to more blue banners. I kind of want to really focus on that on my next turn. So I like that you've got the banners, you've got the scoring at the end of during the Sabbath phase, the 7th rest day. So that is really cool too, because the one you play at the first round is very, very important because that's going to score another 2 times. And so it kind of is like, okay, am I going to go for a wall strategy? If so, I'd really like to get my Mason up there so that it gives me points for every wall that I've built. So I like that. And then at the bottom, you've got those trading possibilities, either trading with the gatekeepers, I think they're called, or just doing those standard trades. So there's all of those things that you have to think about. Which can lock people up. I will have to say that does lead to some more thoughtful, lengthy turns because you're not just saying, I want to do this action. You've got other satellite things going on, but it's a brilliant system.
It really is a great system, and I love that feeling where you're like, yeah, this is the card I want to tuck over there for scoring, and then you realize those banners are gone. Like they're out of my rotation, but those banners are bonuses to me. But not the banners are gone, but that trade is now gone. So you're always making a sacrifice when you're getting something even better. And so I do like that. The card play system reminds me of Viscounts of the West Kingdom, but it gives you, it doesn't do the sliding thing where they kind of phase out. You're choosing when to cover things up. I think there are actually elements of this game that give little winks and nods to other Garfield games that they've made before.
It's almost like a best of mechanics in some regards.
In some regard, but in a way that doesn't feel like, well, I might as well just play this game. Well, I might as well just play that game. Even though there are winks and nods, they still feel fresh to me in this one.
I agree. And it's funny, Wendy, you said that because I had in my head the first couple of times I played it, I kind of had a little bit of that greatest hits feeling of myself. Now, clearly, this one doesn't utilize dice at all, and the last 3 games in their trilogy line have all used dice. But the little things that you kind of recognize, the way that the tracks are there, but they're not just moving up tracks. There's always something else that's involved with them. The little rondelle things feels very, the little tent action part feels very similar to Scholars. And so, yeah, you do see those little kind of winks to earlier games for sure. Did you find that you were able to focus equally on the 3 main actions, or did you find that you really had to specialize in one or the other?
I honestly never tried to focus on everything. I liked specializing. I think you do a little bit of everything, but I don't think you have to choose either way.
I think I agree with that. You can do enough of everything that it feels like you're not dropping. Oh, I didn't do any tent move. You might not feel like you went heavy into tent strategy and still move that thing in almost a full circle. You might still get several of the banners, but I do find myself probably focusing on a few colors more just because my brain can handle that better, and for me that's really fun. I bet there's like more efficient ways to play where you can dabble in all three, or you can like just go almost all in a single. But I tend to do about two, and I find myself doing well and having fun while doing that.
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to do at least a little of everything. I don't think you can just go all wall strategy because just mechanically it won't work. You have to be getting your resources somewhere. You have to be getting your banners somewhere. I mean, obviously you're going to get them from playing cards, but there are ways you can augment those through other things you're doing on the board. They're going to give you boons when you move up a track, or boons when you put out a scribe. That could be something that is a permanent thing, or it can be a more immediate thing. So you have to dabble a bit. My second favorite aspect of the game behind the cards is the worker economy in the game. I think that is really, really clever because, you start off with 6 workers in your supply, and those workers are going to become something when you play them. If you go for the red action, they're going to be becoming Levites, and those stay on the board. When you put a worker there, they stay there. Similar with the scribes in the blue action. When you place those scribes, they are there for the rest of the game. They're scribes for the rest of the game. And there's not a lot of easy ways to get more workers from the supply. So you have to be very careful about that. And when you're using your workers to, I can't remember exactly what they call them, but to put them into your areas where you can buff the banners or place them there to get resources, those do come back, but at the end of the round. And there are certain things you can't do without a worker. You can't build a gate if you don't have a worker. Things along those lines. So I really like that worker economy in the game. I think that feels very different to me.
You know what, Mike, now that you mentioned that, it makes me think about how I think you could go in this game with not doing any blues. I think you could go without doing any reds, but I cannot see how you could go through the game without doing anything with the grays. And, completely avoiding the walls. That seems hard to do. Whereas I played a game where I almost didn't even do, I think I did one thing in the red the whole time. You know what I mean?
The temple, the altar.
The little temple Levi. Did I even sacrifice a Levi? I don't even know if I sacrificed it. You know what I mean? Not sacrifice, but
you
like.
Don't sacrifice the Levites.
You don't sacrifice Levites. You encourage them to become.
You give them the shoe bread. That's what you do.
There you go. One thing that I have a question of is I found that I was able to feed my workers in this game, but it's not necessarily super easy, but I also don't think that it was extremely hard. I know a lot of people, that's a struggle they have with worker placement games or games in general, that you have to feed your workers. How'd you guys feel about that?
I'll speak to it really quick because I want to tie that in with Mike's point. I love how you use your little worker placement pool. It kind of reminds me, like like those little winks and nods to like Legacy of You and the recent shipwrights, where you place your workers into these areas and you're like, oh, I'll get those back. But if I don't use them during the round, during the Sabbath phase, or the preparing for the Sabbath phase, then they can go into the farms and get me that food. So you're always sitting there going, well, I have 5 guys, this is great, I can use as many as I want. But I might want to keep about 3 of them left over, just as farmers to get, there's an insurance policy. Oh yeah, the laborers, Mike, you're right. The laborers to go and get that bread is kind of like an insurance policy in case my actions don't provide enough food. And so I think that there are definitely ways that you don't have to stress about food, but you're sitting there making fun strategic choices where you're going, I could use this worker to beef up the number of gray banners I have this turn. I'm so excited about that. But I might need him as a laborer to get 2 bread instead. Ooh, and that's a fun conflict point within your decision making.
Yeah, and I definitely confused you there, Chris, unnecessarily. You have the farmers and the laborers. The farmers get you the food, the laborers get you the resources. So you can choose which one of those. But the point remains is that that's a big part of that worker economy that I really, really like. I think we might as well just jump into some final thoughts here because I think we've gone into some pretty decent depth about the mechanical elements of the game. Why don't one of you two go first? I can anchor it here. I'll go last.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm going to give this an 8.5. I think this, compared to the South Tigris games that have come out, this feels like a lighter step, it's a step in a lighter direction, but I also almost feel like it's a step in a better direction. It's interesting, Mike, how you said that you felt like this was a a heavier game, but it's funny because compared to some of the games they put out recently, I feel like this is not light at all, but just like a little bit lighter. And maybe it's having those mechanisms that are refreshing, that they've come back a little bit, so I don't feel like it's from square one. But also I feel like there's just like 4 different things you can do in the game, you know what I mean? And there's only 3 banners. There's not a lot you have to learn to be able to look at the board and do something with it. And so I really like that. I think the idea of building the wall is the main aspect, so it makes sense that would be something that you probably have to do in this game. And then the historical side of things, I like that they have this historical series, and I think that this was a lot of fun and a lot of good decisions in it.
I've kind of debated about exactly where I'm going to come in. I'm coming a little bit higher. I'm coming at a 9 because I have so much fun seeing as decisions I make kind of open up new possibilities throughout the round. I also like that, and a complaint that I think is valid for some people, is that a lot of the Garfield games don't have too many interaction points. There is some little interaction here and there, but they're not what you would call terribly interactive games, which for me doesn't bother me usually. Mm-hmm. But I appreciate as well with this one, as people are clearing off parts of the wall, you're like, oh, you took the type of rubble that I wanted. But now I have a spot that I can build. Interesting, right? Or
moving up the temple even.
Moving up the temple, moving up the scribe path.
Yeah.
Like filling in the temple areas. What was the one I was just thinking of? But so anyway, as you build up those different gates, now you're incentivized to build up wall sections next to it to get these bonuses, and yet those mechanisms aren't overbearing. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of including a little bit of like Lisboa, cleaning up the rubble, making spots available, building back up the city. But I also really love the theming. Not just the theme. I think it's a cool biblical theme, a historic theme. But I also really like the theming. Everything behind it seems intentional. The altar, the Levites, the little joke in there that, for example, when you sacrifice a cube, it says you can return it to the supply or you can leave it on the altar for theme. And just those little things there elevate this whole game for me so much. I really love it. It's a 9. Highly recommend.
Well, I'm actually also coming in at a 9, Chris. I think that it is fantastic, clearly. It's interesting, Wendy, the idea of weight is a very thorny one. And so it's something I would not really try to debate with anybody on because, I think you are correct. That in some ways it's harder to deal with some of the South Tigris games because, first of all, you have a tremendous amount of iconography, unique ways of doing dice that you haven't really seen before. This one, I think, has a wider decision space, and that's why I was thinking it was a bit heavier because, like I said, there are so many things to consider with each card placement. So a lot of people say, Lisboa, play a card. That's all you do. Play a card. Well, slow down. There's a lot more that's happening. In this one, too, you're also just playing a card. So it's a wider decision space, but probably easier to teach. I think that I would be more likely to be able to teach this without playing it very recently than I would something like Scholars or Wayfarers. So that's all I have to say about that. I've really talked already about the things that I really like about the game, so I won't belabor that. I would also just say, and this is a bit echoing off something you said, Chris, is that it becomes more and more clear to me with every release how thoughtful these games are. Nothing seems to be there because it just needs to be there for mechanical purpose. Nothing seems to be superfluous. Everything has a very specific purpose, and you can see it in the design. And they'll even put little thematic notes in the rulebook for those that care. If you don't care, then what you've got is an extremely tight, well-designed Euro game. And that's going to be enough for most people. But if you're into the thematic thing from a historical or a religious background, and you love this type of game, it's going to be a slam dunk for you. I was a history teacher for many years, so I have that thing going for me. But I also just love the way Garfield makes Euro games. That's the bottom line. I play fewer Euro games now than I did 5 years ago. But every time one of their Euro games comes out, I'm going to at least try it because I have such a wealth of prior knowledge to work from. All right, well, I guess that's going to do it. It's a seal of excellence for Ezra and Nehemiah, a game that all three of us feel deserves that seal. So, until next time, I'm Mike DeLisio.
I'm Wendy Yee.
And I'm Chris Yee.
You got to build the walls. You can't ignore the walls.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching another video from the Dice Tower. Hey, you want to learn more about us, communicate with us? We have a Facebook group, we have a Discord channel, lots of different ways to get involved with the Dice Tower. You can find that in our Linktree link below. So just click that, it will take you and you can communicate with us on Facebook, join our Facebook groups. There's lots of cool things that you can find and become part of the Dice Tower. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Tom Vassell.